pleasure to be here, and as Mike said, we've got a long track record of cooperation with the Institute, and it's a pleasure to see many of our members here, because we share many members throughout the world. And it was an excellent networking opportunity last night, and most enjoyable. I feel slightly not at ease this morning because following a PR specialist is a bit of a tough ask, and certainly my presentation won't have penguins in it, but it will have one or two crashes. So, maritime professionals or automatons, is it a brave new world or is it not? These are the aspects to consider this morning, because automation is already with us. It's been with us for many years, for decades. As you've seen on the slide, covering your cover slide for the conference, Rolls-Royce is already designing a fully automated cargo ship. It will be here at some point, and I'll go on to just touch on the surveyor's role in the future, but I see that Alexandros is speaking on that later this afternoon, so I'll leave that mostly to him. So yes, fully automated ships are being dreamt up as a concept. It'll be long after I retire that they actually get out into the wide world. The last I heard, Rolls-Royce has got rid of most of their marine department as part of the downturn in the industry, so I suspect their brave new world is delayed somewhat. And but you know, they are technically feasible, and I'll speak more on that in a moment. And there are a lot of them out there already. There are plenty of smaller craft that are fully autonomous. But in the meantime, the people on the left will still definitely be required. And that's of some comfort. I've already taken a fair amount of flack from my membership when we started writing and speaking out about fully autonomous ships. And I was accused by some of my more difficult members, and Mike, of course, has got some as well. We probably share them, actually. And as to why on earth we were supporting fully autonomous ships and saying that they were inevitable, and you know, we were just trying to write our members out of employment. And we said, not at all, not at all. What we're actually saying is that you may have a better life work balance by not being on a ship, but by being in a control centre ashore. And we need to make sure that that happens. That's just one part of it. So I'm confident that they will happen, but I'm not envisaging that they will be happening to any great extent in the next 25 years, in term which is the theme of your conference. Yes, there will be some out there, but the vast majority of ships in 25 years' time will still be fully manned. I'm pretty sure of that. And let's move on to what's actually happening at the moment in terms of automation. Fully integrated bridge systems, inertia navigation systems, unmanned engine rooms. We've been there for a long time. They're becoming more and more integrated. The cruise ship world is leading the field in this. I did actually add some more photographs into my presentation, but too late for Mike to deal with them. But the cruise ship world now, and particularly Carnival, have brought in a command and control system where they've got a navigator and a co-navigator sitting at the front of the bridge in their comfortable leather chairs, as Mike Gray was describing last night in his speech. And behind them, there's an operations director, another word for a captain, who may be the captain or may not, and the helmsman and so on. The pilot will fit in there somewhere, and I'll come on to that in a moment, because that is creating some tensions. But they are essentially programming their navigation system to do it all for them. And they're sitting there monitoring what the navigation system is doing and how it's driving the ship. And they can do that from the entire operation, from moving off the berth, navigating out of the port, and on their way, if they're allowed to. And that's where the tensions with the pilots come in. And equally, as the IMO's decreed that all ships now have to plan their passage from berth to berth, they can do it coming in the other way as well. So that the navigators are increasingly monitors of automatic systems. So they're becoming, in a way, automatons. One of the supposed advantages of that is it will give them more time to look out of the window and use all of their senses as a human to make sure that the automated system is actually doing what it should be doing. Therein lies something of a problem. Teaching people to look out of the window seems to be an incredibly difficult thing to do. We write about it constantly, and we have the Navigator magazine, which we brought out a couple of years ago, aimed specifically at the younger navigators to try and get the basics of the art of navigation through to them and counter the over-reliance on the electronics that they are so comfortable with. ECDIS is a case in point, the electronic chart display information system. Head in the screen, as Mike, I think, said last night, you can suppress quite a lot of information in ECDIS, and we already have ECDIS-assisted groundings. I'm sure some of your members have been attending those ships where they've run across a shallow patch because it wasn't showing up on the ECDIS chart. It had been suppressed. The hydrography officers are absolutely tearing their hair out about this because they've put all of the effort into surveying the areas of the world, and the shallow patch is quite clearly there on the chart. It's there on the paper chart. It's there in the electronic chart, but it's been programmed out, and people are running across them or onto them. So there are advantages and disadvantages to automation as far as the navigation is concerned, and the same with the engine room. The being in tune with the engine when you are physically removed from it, you've got unmanned engine rooms, you've got a nice air-conditioned, soundproofed control room. If you're down there at all, you may be up on the bridge. And so the old senses of hearing the engine going slightly wrong and dealing with it before it goes majorly wrong is being lost. E-navigation, the harmonization of the ship and shore navigation systems and information and control systems, very much an IMO project. It's been running for something over 8 years now, hasn't made a huge amount of progress, I have to say. We've been engaged in that project from virtually day one. We were invited by IALA to take a seat in their working group, and my director of projects, David Petrayko, ended up chairing the principal working group that was trying to get end-user input into the design of the e-navigation system. Very educational process for him because it was highly political. And he spent most of his time tearing his hair out trying to make any progress with all the different agendas that were running. But there was a fight going on between IMOs and IALA as to who was leading this project. But in concept, it was meant to improve the safety of navigation around the coast by harmonizing the navigation systems, getting the communication going between ship and shore, improving all of that aspect, controlling the flow of ships through the congested areas, making sure that they're arriving at the port sort of just in time to take their berth rather than screaming up there and then having to anchor or getting late and so on. In some parts of the world, it may well be very beneficial. Certainly the Baltic has always been the keenest area in getting e-navigation going. And they seem to be, the Baltic countries seem to be at the forefront of all of these initiatives because they've got such a congested area and very ecologically sensitive as well. But it's not delivering even now. Now, the platforms are in place, the foundations have been put in place. ECTIS and making ECTIS mandatory is very much part of the navigation agenda. So the building blocks are getting in place there, but it's, in the last year or so, I would submit that it's run out of a fair amount of steam. May get there in the end. And as I say, the navigator and the engineer are increasingly in a monitoring role. So their job has changed. But regulation still says that they have to be using all of the means of navigation, all of the senses, and therein lies something of a problem, as I said. So what are the current issues? Reliability of the equipment is definitely an issue. They rely on the technology. The technology breaks down and they have to go back to the traditional skills which they haven't been practicing. If they are a fully ECTIS ship, they haven't even got paper charts on board. They've got the two ECTIS, one as a redundant mechanism, so if one falls down, they can, the other one's flashed up, ready to go. It's quite possible, and it happens from time to time, that they lose the GPS signal completely. And then ECTIS is pretty useless. The training issue is that training is not keeping up with technology. Regulation is not keeping up with technology. So STCW, the 2010 Manila amendments come into force beginning of next year. So, it's, again, there's a time lag. It took them from 1995 to 2010 to change STCW at all, apart from the occasional tweak. And already it's out of date. So there's technology coming through all the time that is not being taken into basic training under STCW. So in the case of ECTIS courses had to be dreamt up, and the only mandatory requirement is the Principles of ECTIS course, the induction course. You then have to have familiarization training on the actual equipment that you're going to be using. The Nautical Institute took note of this and actually brought together and facilitated the main stakeholders in the industry to bring out guidance on ECDIS training, because only that basic course of 2 or 3 days had been mandated. And it needs to be far more than that. But even after you've done good training, you've then got to get experienced in using ECDIS, and that takes time. And moving from one ship to another, there are multiple designs of ECDIS out there, many different manufacturers, many different models within the manufacturers. Same with lifeboats. There's about 80 lifeboat manufacturers. Moving from one ship to another, you've got a lot of steep learning to do before you can become competent on the equipment you're faced with. So maintaining the traditional navigation skills is extremely important. They are the ultimate fallback, and they're not, they are being taught in the nautical colleges to the reasonable extent, although of course the amount of college time has been reduced under STCW in the same way that the amount of sea time has been reduced under STCW. So people are going through the STCW process much quicker than they used to, and coming out at the end of it with a master's certificate with far less experience under their belt and the expectation of becoming a master extremely quickly after getting their master's certificate. But if you're not practicing traditional navigation skills, they degrade very quickly indeed. So suddenly the loss of technology, and you're having to do it the old way, and you haven't practiced it, takes time, and almost certainly initially you'll be inaccurate. The other aspect of automation is the belief that because it's digital, it's super accurate, super reliable, and we are seeing time and time again reports of ships passing incredibly closely within a couple of cables of each other. And I submit that anybody in this room, because we are of somewhat of an age, would have been not sleeping soundly in our beds at night if we thought that our officer of the watch was going that close to passing ships. But it's happening, and the P&I clubs are tearing their hair out about it because it's an incredibly risky situation. No time to react if things suddenly change. Interaction between ships is not taught in the commercial world to any great extent. The military does it because they expect to do it and to be close to ships when they're refueling. But in the commercial world, there's very little taught about interaction between ships. So, as I say, use of all available means is something that we have to keep hammering home. And the final thing on automation is the effect on the job and the profession. Far too many people, and one of the reasons for the Navigator magazine, feel that they're just doing a job. We did a survey of Generation Y just a few years ago now. I sent 2 of my Gen Y members of staff out to interview Gen Y seafarers in person in the colleges, UK and overseas. And one of the shocking results of that survey was that they were consistently told that those young people didn't look on themselves as being professionals. They looked on the master and the chief engineer as being professionals. So they didn't think they were going to be professionals until they got up to that level. Completely missing the point that as an officer of the watch, they would be in charge of a multi-million-dollar ship full of cargo, hundreds of millions of dollars of cargo, and X number of seafarers' lives, quite apart from what they might do to the marine environment if things went wrong. That is a professional job. From day one, from when you're a cadet, you're in the profession. And we brought the navigator out to try and get that through to them and say, you are a professional, you need to act professionally and carry on learning, not just do your ticket and do your job, but continuing professional development throughout. I mentioned some tensions. Pilotage will not surprise you as being a major tension. We have an ongoing debate in Seaways about the relationship of the pilot with the bridge team. Is the pilot an integrated part of the bridge team? Should the pilot be integrated within the bridge team? It's a debate that's raging in the cruise world because they've brought in this very tight command and control system with closed loop communication, and they want to integrate the pilot within that team. Some of the pilots are saying, well, you know, in a compulsory pilot authority area, we have the con of the ship by law. And we're not going to take orders from anybody. That's the traditional view. So that debate is going on. Our role in the Institute is to facilitate that debate and try and bring the sides closer together to find solutions and agree on best practice and promulgate that best practice. That's our role. We're not going to particularly take sides on it, but we'll try and bring the opposing forces together. There are plenty of pilots who are quite happy to be integrated in the bridge team, and they find it an unusual experience because with most ships, when they walk on board, as soon as they get on the bridge, the master heaves a sigh of relief and says, I'm off to do my emails. It's over to you, pilot. So that's the other end of the spectrum. And he's left up there with a helmsman, and if he's lucky, an officer of the watch. Regulation, not keeping up with changes in technology. There's far too much of a time lag. The processes in the IMO are incredibly slow. Each committee and subcommittee, generally speaking, only meets once a year with correspondence courses and intersessional meetings occasionally. So the pace of change is slow. And that's not such a bad thing, providing the industry picks up and covers the gap. And one of the good examples of that is dynamic positioning training, which the Institute has been running on behalf of the industry since 1982. Not mandated within the IMO, still not mandated within the IMO. It's in Part B of STCW now, but it's an industry specialization. The standard is set by the industry stakeholders that we facilitate, and then we accredit the training providers against that standard and then certificate the DPOs when they've been through the whole training and prove that they've done it properly. So it doesn't all have to be mandatory regulation. The industry can get a grip of its needs and set their own standards and the processes in place. And Mike has been talking about that as far as the marine surveying side of things, and it's certainly the right way forward, because you can change the standard to meet the need as it changes. As the need changes, you can change the criteria and the requirements of the training far more quickly than you can do it through the IMO or national government, for that matter. So what's happening on fully autonomous ships? Well, there is an industry body set up here in the UK, which goes by the acronym of MASRWG, which is Marine Autonomous Ship Regulatory Working Group, if I remember correctly, and it's up on the screen. Industry stakeholders have come together to recognise that fully autonomous ships are out there already in the terms of small military craft, surveying craft and such like. They're small craft, but they are fully autonomous and they're being controlled from a control centre ashore or from a mothership. And they're buzzing around doing what they do. The military has been blowing them out of the water as target ships for quite a long time. Anyway, this working group is looking at the legal aspect, because if we go fully autonomous, given that maritime regulation is pretty much written to blame the master for everything that goes wrong, is that going to have to change? Where does the control centre ashore fit into it from a legal point of view? What is the equivalence in terms of classification, registration, insurance, all that side of things? So they're looking at that. And the bit that we're particularly interested in, why we're sitting on this, this working group, is the skills training and accreditation. They asked us to give them a presentation on our dynamic positioning training scheme and the accreditation and certification we do for that, because they are conscious that the people that end up in the control centres ashore need to be properly trained and experienced to do that job. Initially, one can envisage a lot of them being ex-mariners, but not necessarily. And certainly the air traffic controllers aren't all ex-pilots. So the same may well apply with control centres ashore. But there will need to be control centres ashore, and we'll see where that goes. 5 minutes. Okay. The complexity of seagoing will have to be built in to the programming of the autonomous ship. The sensors are going to have to be incredibly reliable, and they're going to have to cope with the illogical actions of manned ships. Now, hopefully, picture on the left there, would not ever happen in a fully autonomous ship because its sensors would pick up the fact that the island had moved in front of it, and therefore some anti-collision action might be necessary. But the circle diagram there just represents the complexity of all the things that are going to have to be programmed in to the sensors and the computers on board, all of which will have to be at least doubled to give redundancy, and they're all going to have to be incredibly reliable and cope with salt air and waves coming on board and all the rest of it that is not very good for electronic equipment. Will it be safer? Well, I submit that accidents will continue to happen. Marine surveyors will certainly still be needed because you'll have to go in and try and work out why it went wrong and sort out the mess. The mixed fleet of fully autonomous and manned will be here for however long you like to imagine, certainly 50 years, I'm sure. Probably to the end of the century, you'll still have manned ships out there. And even if it's only the smaller ones, the coasters, that really nobody's going to invest in this type of technology for small ships, I wouldn't have thought, and the fishing boats and such like, they will still be out there with people on board doing incredibly illogical things. So, advantages of autonomy. it's being sold to the industry as huge cost savings, no crew. So you won't have to pay anybody, apart from the people in the control centre. The insurers are beginning to think rather fondly of it because they won't have any personal accident claims anymore. And that is the area of growth in P&I claims. And it's costing them a lot. So no cost on that. Less steel, you won't need a big accommodation block. Less fuel, because the ship will be far more aerodynamic with that great big windbreak where everybody's living. So big savings from fuel as well. Less risk from the illogical actions of humans, and the control staff will have a far more balanced work-life balance than seafarers, and we might actually be able to do rather more recruitment into the maritime industry as a result, because we're not sending people off to sea for months on end. Disadvantages: the costs of the sensors and equipment. The control centres, of course, will have a cost as well. Training and expertise of the controllers. Yes, we can train up ex-seafarers initially, but we'll run out of them eventually. And there will still be illogical actions. Not all air traffic controllers get it right all of the time. But at least there won't be any crew fatigue. So that's good. The other big disadvantage will be the loss of maritime professional expertise from the industry, because a lot of the shoreside industry in the maritime world requires the ex-seafarers coming into it to provide that expertise. Lots of issues to resolve. I just touch on the obvious one of the vulnerability to cyber attack. We're already writing a lot about cyber attack. The P&I clubs are issuing papers on it. Our autonomous systems already are vulnerable to it, either intentionally or unintentionally. You can wipe out your ECTIS very quickly just by getting the upload wrong of the latest update. And there will be an effect on recruitment. I submit that accidents will continue to happen, so your jobs are safe. And that reduction in maritime professionals coming ashore will certainly make you gold dust for a long time, but your succession planning might be a bit of a problem, and you'll probably have to go on working till you're at least 90. Accessing autonomous ships, well, that could be a bit of a problem. I just flashed this one up. It's one of our favourite Mars photographs. Absolutely stunning what people would do. You can see the gangway in the back of the picture there, and they still thought they could do that. Thank you very much. That's me. And just before I go, I just want to do a little advert for you. Those of you that are still in London for the weekend, two wonderful events for you to observe, and the small craft surveyors amongst you will be particularly interested in the first one, which is the Great River Race on Saturday. 21.6 mile aquatic marathon from just off the Millwall dock in the Thames down at Isle of Dogs up to Ham House, Richmond. I'm the chairman of the Great River Race for my sins, and 331 boats of all shapes and sizes, traditional craft, 4 oars, 4 paddles or more will be taking part with a cox and a passenger. And so there's usually 1 or 2 crashes amongst the competitors. So any of you small craft surveyors can be around in London, you might get a job. But well worth, it's a spectacle well worth going to see. The best views are up the narrower parts of the river up by Richmond, but any of the London bridges will give you a good view. The other thing this weekend is the reenactment of the Great Fire of London. And I think one of your members has already been involved in that and doing all of the work with the barges. They've got the skyline of London on 2 big barges on the banks of the Thames, which on Sunday they're going to take out in the middle and set fire to recreate it. The warning on that one is that Saturday and Sunday there are major road closures throughout the City of London. So if you're driving, it's going to be a complete nightmare and gridlock. Thank you very much.